What is the history of Marathas?
Anyone who prospered under the Muslim dynasty became a Maratha. Both the non-Brahmin movement and the Brahmin movement is using Shivaji as the key figure to make their claim.
And you may choose to ignore the caste, but it's still a reality.
There are about 14 CMs of Maharashtra belong to the Maratha community.
Wow. Alrighty, hello, I am Abir Lairi. You are watching the Indian Express. I am with Adrija Roy Chaudhary, and today we'll be talking about Marathas in Maharashtra.
Yes.
It's a very sensitive topic because a lot of political turmoil happens in Maharashtra because of this particular issue, this particular reservation issue, आप बोल सकते हो. But who are Marathas? A lot of people may not know about it. We need to address that first, and then we'll talk about the politics and the all things other. What is the history of Marathas?
So, pehle to I'll just say this, that yes, there is a lot of politics around the Maratha reservation agitation, but Marathas are equally powerful in Maharashtra politics. A large number of the CMs are also from the Maratha community. So, the interesting thing about the Marathas is that historically this was not one caste. This was number of castes. There is they come together as one caste.
It's like a unification of a lot of castes.
Yes, and it is primarily that happens because of the rule of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj.
Okay.
All right.
And why do they unify?
So if you can trace this back to again the Muslim invasions. In the Deccan that happens. In the 14th century, and the first Muslim Sultanate is established in the Deccan, which is called the Bahmani Sultanate. Bahmani. Now, when that happens, the Muslim dynasty, it stays in power for a while. And what scholars typically say is that anyone who prospered under the Muslim dynasty became a Maratha. Why is that? Now, what they mean exactly is, so, the term Maratha, it's very interesting that before this, before it came to denote a caste, it was used very loosely for anybody in this region. But it's like anybody living in this
Maratha region.
Maratha region was a Maratha. What is the unifying factor is that these are people who became part of the army under the Muslim sultanates. All right. So they came from various castes. They could have been Kunbis, Lohars. Typically, these were lower castes. And the OBC, what came to be termed OBCs much later. They were typically from the lower castes, and they formed part of the army. Now, it is actually under Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, like I said, that this identity sort of solidifies further. His father, Shahaji Bhosle, he was also a Maratha general who served in the Deccan Sultanate, in the Bahmani Sultanate. But it is under his son, under Chhatrapati Shivaji, that we see that he carves out an empire of his own. Even though, the Bhosle dynasty of his father, by then also there was independent aspirations. You become a community of your own, serving in the army. With time, with years, you form your own aspirations of your own kingdom. It happens very often if you see in medieval history. So this is also typically that kind of a story where under Shahaji Bhosle, we see that he starts harboring these aspirations of becoming an emperor himself. But it is his son Shivaji who finally is able to make that transition and build an empire of his own. And so he builds an independent Maratha Empire. And now, whoever is part of his army, who's, part of his empire, that sort of that Maratha identity, it becomes very much
evident. So priorly they were Lohars and this and that, but after Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, it becomes like a caste in itself.
It becomes a caste in itself. And if you go into the historical archives, it's very interesting that even when Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj is in power, there are conversations between Brahmins and about whether these guys should be called, should be called Kshatriyas, which is the the warrior caste, to which the Marathas now claim to be a part of, whether they should be called Kshatriyas or they should be called Shudras, because most of them came from the lower castes.
Oh.
So there's a lot of back and forth that is happening even when Chhatrapati Shivaji is in power, and there are records which will say that, in somewhere in the early 1800s or something, when a lot of these people were identifying themselves as Kunbis and Lohars separately.
Okay.
And by the time we come to much later, the 1900s, which is of course much after Shivaji's empire, but by then the caste identity was very much solidified.
Okay.
All right.
It was Marathas.
So by the 1930s or something, they are very consciously saying that, okay, we don't want to identify as a Kunbi, we are a Maratha, we are a higher caste. We don't want to be associated with the lower castes anymore, because that sort of, empowerment of the community happens over the years, even and more so after Shivaji's death. And there is again a process that goes on soon after his death, how they become more powerful as a community.
And how did they become so powerful and relevant to the Maharashtra politics?
So like I said, in the aftermath of the Maratha, aftermath of Shivaji's death, and once the Maratha Empire collapses, the Maratha community's caste identity is already well formed. It's actually interesting that in the late 19th century, when when you see a lot of social reform movements happening all over India, that is also when a non-Brahmin movement starts out in Maharashtra.
Okay.
You have this group called the Satya Shodhak Samaj that was founded by Jyotirao Phule in Pune, and they are actively agitating against Brahmins.
Okay.
So this is the late 1800s when this starts happening, and by the time you come to the early 20th century, when nationalism is on the rise, so this non-Brahmin movement then becomes very much active in protesting against a Brahmin-led nationalist movement. So this streak of the non-Brahmin movement is, for instance, very much against Tilak's, Bal Gangadhar Tilak's movement in Maharashtra. And they're very actively promoting promoting themselves that, okay, this is the place where a lot of Shudras has, for instance, brought cultural development, and the lower castes are, for instance, very key to understanding this region. So that kind of a movement is very much present in Maharashtra, in the Maharashtra region at this time. And what is more interesting is that both the non-Brahmin movement and the Brahmin movement is using Shivaji as the key figure to make their claim.
And propagate their claim.
Yes, and propagate. So even Bal Gangadhar Tilak also has, uses Shivaji's imagery to have these nationalist festivals and all of that. And similarly, on the opposite side, say Jyotirao Phule's and the Satya Shodhak Samaj's movement, they are also using Shivaji's image to say that, he was our warrior king, and, we are his descendants, and we are the real claim, we are the ones who can claim power in this region. So that is the beginning of their political journey of the Marathas. In the nationalist, the time of the freedom struggle, we see them emerge over here mainly because of the non-Brahmin movement. And now, by the time we see elections coming with electoral democracy emerging in the 20th century, caste politics has already become a very important factor. Right. And now the Marathas were voting as a single block.
Okay.
So, and they become, typically they become, a voting block for anybody who is running for elections in the Maharashtra region.
So the Maratha will typically vote for a Maratha.
That kind of a thing. So, and it's very interesting that, in all these years, I think there are about 14 CMs of Maharashtra belong to the Maratha community.
Wow.
Including,
that's a big number.
Yes, including the previous Chief Minister Eknath Shinde. He too was a Maratha. So they become very, very important in the politics of Maharashtra.
Okay.
When the Maharashtra state is born, through the linguistic reorganization, that time to the Maratha community is pretty much at the forefront. So in many of these agitations, you will see in the political changes happening in Maharashtra, the Maratha community becomes a very key factor.
Okay.
In determining how things change over here.
But how did the reservation come into the picture? Why did it come into picture?
Now that is again a very interesting question. The thing is that what a lot of scholars tell me is that yes, we see a lot of Marathas in power, and they have been politically very influential community, but because of the fact that their caste origins are very diverse. So even today, the Marathas are not a homogeneous caste. So you will see in certain parts of Maharashtra, they are landlords. Then there is in some other part of Maharashtra, they're typically farmers. Then they might be somewhere else, like they might be engaged in some other occupation. In fact, there is a significant population of the Marathas who now actively claim that they should be called Kunbis. Remember that, few centuries ago, the same Kunbis had made a demand that we should be called Marathas.
Okay.
Today, because of
economic disparity.
There's an economic disparity because the caste is not really homogeneous. It's not one community.
You may choose to ignore the caste, but it's still a reality.
It's still a reality.
You may rebrand it as anything else, but it is still the ground reality.
Absolutely.
And I guess they are facing that.
Yes,
that's the main
that is the main problem, because a large percentage of the Marathas are still not economically very strong.
Okay.
And they are demanding that we need to be given fair opportunities and we need to be given reservations.
Makes sense.
And it is perhaps better to call us Kunbis rather than Marathas. So that agitation is what has taken over. Again, scholars have said this, that the Marathas over the years have also seen the success stories of, say, the Patels in Gujarat, and that of course has also influenced their own demand now, that we would also seek the same kind of opportunities. But mainly, like you mentioned,
Patels in Gujarat is a similar story to Marathas?
Similar story in the sense that they also agitated and claimed reservation.
But not like a unification of different castes.
No, not as a unification of it. This is, their story, the story of the Marathas is interesting because of the sort of historical journey they've had from being diverse castes, being part of several different caste groups. You become part of one caste community only because you were serving in Shivaji's army. And you are brought together because of the imagery and the historical consciousness of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. And then over the years, now you realize that there is also a lot of disparity in the caste. There are some people who are very influential, economically well off, and then there is a significant segment who still call themselves Marathas, but are not really, economically very strong. So they would rather claim a lower caste identity
and have
access to the same, benefits, the constitutional benefits that India would provide to them if they identified as a lower caste.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Anything else we should discuss about it? I guess we have covered primarily most of it.
See, only one thing I would say, that what is the story of the Marathas, if you think about it, it's very similar to, say, how the non-Brahmin movement happened in Tamil Nadu, the Yadavs in Bihar and UP, where you have a lower caste, emerging and becoming politically very influential. And in that sense, that's also a very wonderful story of how social mobility can happen historically even within the caste structure. What differentiates the Maratha story is that it's also a very long process, unlike the Yadavs.
It's 400-500 years.
Yes, it happens over a course of a few centuries.
So, but Yadavs is not that old.
No, definitely not. It's in the 90s that we see the Yadavs.
On that note, बहुत shukriya for watching this podcast. If you have any comments for us, just comment down below. Thank you for watching Past and Curious. Thank you. Ta-da.
you.